Hello, everyone. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. You got Rod Crandall and you have Andrew Casilius. He might be labeled Nathan Berglund. And we're very happy to present our Coach's Corner here for June. Really appreciate you being here. Uh, by being here at the end, we do have a number of resources, including a recording that we're going to end up sending out to you. To the extent that you have any questions for me or Andrew, if you would please put those in the chat, we will monitor those and address those as needed. And today, in the next 45 minutes to an hour, we are going to hope to help you have a better long-term care conversation with your clients and ultimately describe to you what my input was to the CLTC organization. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with CLTC, but they're a nationally accredited effective training program for the certification of long-term care. And I'm a graduate. I graduated from that course about 18 years ago. Must have been longer, maybe closer to 20 years ago. And the normal course they have is a 2-day master course that goes in very deep on how to steward and put together a plan, how to fund a plan, how it coordinates with Medicaid and Medicare and partnership programs. And it's a very in-depth process. And they've been certifying thousands of advisors and insurance people over the last 20 or 25 years. And what they've realized is that the wealth advisor space isn't really interested in that course. And so they tapped me and personally and about 3 other individuals to create a skinny down version of that course, which is a 4-hour course that they're calling the Foundations course. And that course is specifically designed to wealth advisors who do financial planning. And they asked me to help create that course. That course has now been completed, and we're looking to deliver it several times moving forward. So while this course isn't specifically that Foundations course, what you're going to hear today is really what my contributions were to that course. And of course, I was tapped because US Advisors really was built by wealth advisors for wealth advisors. And virtually almost all of our production comes from wealth advisors. And part of this Coach's Corner is really to help wealth advisors identify clients to have better conversations with and put those into the context of the financial plan, and then utilize insurance vehicles as funding vehicles to make sure that our clients' financial plans come to fruition and that their business succession plans come to fruition. Right. And so today you're going to hear a little bit about how I've approached this and how we've approached it here at US Advisors. So my hope is that you're able to take 1 or 2 or 3 things out of this, and to the extent that you can, that'll be a very, very good success. So with that, we're going to get started. So I guess let me go back there. The number one thing to understand about long-term care is that the product is not the plan. The product funds the plan. And when we're talking about long-term care, what we're really talking about is retirement portfolio protection. Okay, what we're really talking about is that we have clients that have established a beautiful financial plan, and to the extent that they don't get sick or other risks don't show up, they're going to be able to have a wonderful retirement. What we need to do is we need to be able to ask them, what would happen if you had to double dip inside of your retirement portfolio for the care that one of you might need? See, it's my belief that if somebody needs care, they're effectively going to get the care they need. And that care that they need is going to cost something, and they're going to pay for it themselves, absent an insurance contract. And what we need to ask is we need to ask our clients how they feel emotionally and financially about the double dipping effect that can occur on their assets to the extent that they might need care. And so that right there should give you just a preview of how this might be a little bit different. Now, we are going to talk about some product today because I want you to understand conceptually that there's a number of different ways to fund this plan, but the bulk of this is about stewarding the right kind of conversation. And so the agenda that we have is, first of all, the ideal client identification. Who do we need to have these kind of conversations with, right? We're not going to have them with every single client, right? Then we're going to talk about what does that conversation really look like? And I just previewed that a little bit for you with regard to this retirement portfolio protection. And then ultimately, if we can have a great conversation, then what we can do is we can put together a plan of care for those clients. And that's really what they need. And that plan doesn't specifically require insurance, but if you're talking to the right kind of client and you're having the right kind of conversation, it's pretty obvious that some form of long-term care should be put in place, because it's the single largest risk that people have in retirement, in my opinion. And if we can't have the right conversation, they just think it's too expensive and they don't want to talk about it. And so now we haven't helped them secure the coverage that they need. We haven't helped them think about things in an appropriate way. We haven't helped them protect their assets. By the way, their assets might be our assets under management, right? What happens if we don't have long-term care in place and they go in and pull out of the portfolio, right? Well, that's affecting our fees. What if they're pulling out of a portfolio in a market like today, where we're down 20 or 20+% just from the beginning of the year? Well, now they're redeeming shares in a down market. And so I would suggest to you that long-term care insurance is not only retirement portfolio protection, but it's really AUM protection, right? It's really protecting your own income as well. And so to the extent that we can follow what we believe to be the platinum rule, which is to the extent we can understand and meet our clients' needs, then ultimately our needs are met. And that's perfectly demonstrated here by making sure that we are protecting the retirement portfolio for our clients. Okay. So,
Rod,
yes, sir.
I'll just add one comment, maybe a little humor here, but famously or maybe infamously, Mike Tyson said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So we can apply the same concept here. Everybody has a financial plan until long-term care event happens, and now they have to pay for it without having a plan.
No doubt about it. I love that, and it's hilarious. You forgot it's the great philosopher Mike Tyson.
The great philosopher.
But he's right. And relative to this, if we don't have a plan, we say, hey, it's not going to happen to me. Well, then we're in big trouble. But what if we could anticipate the punch, right? We might actually be able to move out of the way. And so that's a beautiful, beautiful addition there. And I think it's very appropriate. All right. So what we have here is, generically speaking, I think clients fall into three categories. You have those that are Medicaid likely. Well, what does that mean? That means they have little to no investable assets, and to the extent that they need care, they aren't going to be able to pay for very much of that care themselves, and will likely need to go on the Medicaid program and let the state pay for them. Okay? I think that's roughly a third, or maybe even more than a third of the population. Now, guess what? If you're a wealth advisor, how many of your clients are going to be Medicaid likely? Probably not too many. Because if they're your clients, they generally have some investments. And if they have investments, they need to protect those investments. So I would suggest that probably a third of people out there are not candidates to have this kind of conversation with, relative to using life insurance or make that long-term care insurance as a funding vehicle. Then you have the middle class. Well, we have a lot of these clients. I don't know exactly how you define the middle class, but generically speaking, the middle class, in my opinion, are those people that you're putting together a retirement plan for, and they want to have a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 monthly income that they can't outlive. And you've told them that with their Social Security and maybe one pension, they can do that. And then we ask them, what happens if we need to pull out another $6,000, another $8,000? What if we need another $10,000, right? Now we're double dipping into that. So I think the middle class are the people that need to have this the most, right? And I know you have some clients like this. Now the wealthy is interesting. Again, what does it mean to be wealthy? I don't know. But I think if you have maybe $3, $4, $5 million, there's a strong argument to be made that that individual could self-insure for long-term care. And by the way, I believe that that is true. But I also believe that those people, just like other clients, just default to, I want to self-insure, which really means I don't want to buy insurance. But mathematically, even if you had $100 million, the least effective way to pay for your care is to pay for your own care dollar for dollar at full retail price, right? By the way, it's not only full retail price, it's probably higher than that, because we usually have to advance from a taxable account, pay taxes to reposition the dollars. So even wealthy individuals, what a lot of those individuals do that are clients of ours is they don't go paying for long-term care insurance each and every year like many people think is required. What they'll do is they'll reposition, or they'll reallocate 100,000 or 200,000 of their entire portfolio to create an asset class called a life insurance and long-term care combination plan, or an annuity and long-term care combination plan. And so these individuals, we can help create an additional asset class that doesn't already exist in their portfolio by repositioning some of their lower yielding assets. And so overall, again, I would suggest to you that the middle class needs this conversation the most. The wealthy needs it second most, if you will, and then Medicaid, likely there really isn't a whole lot for us to be able to do for them relative to insurance planning on that basis.
Rod, to add one comment about wealthy individuals, one analogy is health insurance. When we think about health insurance, cancer, for example, we view that as a catastrophic event. And if you were to self-fund cancer, you could be out hundreds of thousands of dollars easily. And insurance is there to protect you from that catastrophic expense. Same thing with long-term care. If you have somebody that's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, dementia, or even need to spend 3, 4, 5 years in a in-home healthcare or assisted living, you could easily be talking about $100,000 plus a year of expenses. So why not, for healthy individuals, take a fraction of their investable assets and reposition that into some of these products we'll be discussing here in a moment, where it provides leverage 3, 4, sometimes even 6 times your deposit. And by the way, like you mentioned, it would be coming out on a tax-free basis. So can you self-insure? The question is not could you, but why would you want to when there are other options?
There's no doubt about that. And that's a perfect tee up. I know that you know this, Andrew, but I mean, one of my favorite words is consideration. And that's how we get consideration. If we have the right kind of conversation, we can consider, should I insure that or should I keep that risk? And if we really have strong consideration, what we find is, man, these risks are too big to just keep, especially when you look at how low the premiums are as a percentage, right? And especially if you can create assets instead of just expenses through long-term care. And so a lot of people aren't thinking about insurance as an asset. But many of these designs have ending values. Even if we don't need it for long-term care, we either have account value or we have death benefit. And sometimes we can perform better than you might think with guarantees and non-correlated to the market and income tax-free to heirs. And so when you look at, go ahead.
And I'll add one more thing, and this is oftentimes, not being thought about. But let's say if you're a wealthy individual or otherwise, when you get to the point when you need care, are you the one making decisions about the care? Or is it maybe your children or maybe someone else? Right. So the question then becomes, will that person have you in mind, for the best care that you think that you need? Or will there be maybe some ulterior motives? Maybe, my inheritance is being depleted. So, there's some things to consider there too that on the surface doesn't come up, but certainly we've heard some horror stories where family members, take advantage of their loved ones.
There's no doubt. I mean, I've heard that described as the permission slip. By having this coverage in place, you're giving your family a permission slip to get the care that you need. And by the way, we're not waiting for the care that you need. We're trying to get that care as quickly as possible. I was talking to somebody yesterday and I made a comment that we don't want any of our clients to go on claim emotionally. We don't want anyone to need any of this. But mathematically, we want all of our clients to go on claim. When we go on claim, the mathematics of what we had to pay the insurance company versus what they paid us, we end up winning mathematically. And that's completely different than having no coverage. Now we need care, but maybe somebody else is wondering, well, $1 that goes to your care might be $1 less that comes to me. And that can be a gross thing to think about. And maybe some of you go, that doesn't happen. But listen, that does happen. And again, this creates perhaps a permission slip. By the way, not just having the insurance, but having a plan. Part of the plan is communicating your plan to your family, right? And when we have this, not only do we have permission, but now our children or our loved ones can coordinate our care instead of providing our care. And so most clients, when we really talk about this, go, yeah, my daughter would take care of me. Well, I have no doubt that she would. But would you rather that she actually provide that care? Or would you rather she has a vehicle and a plan and a set of instructions and a funding vehicle to coordinate that on your behalf? Right? So
No
it's
question.
important stuff, important stuff. So generically speaking, when you look at product breakdown, a lot of people think that traditional long-term care is the only thing in town. And of course it isn't. I call traditional long-term care the use it or lose it, pay as you go plan. Right? And we're going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to show you an example of 60-year-olds in these categories. Okay. Generally speaking, we see people implement traditional long-term care generally between the ages of 40 and 70. It's not perfect, but that's generally what we see. Okay. Then we can move into hybrid long-term care, which is often a repositioning of assets one time. We might reposition 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000. And we're often seeing those, between 30 and 70, right? Then you've got life insurance with long-term care and or chronic illness riders. We see that bought sometimes earlier. And the reason for that is a lot of these growing families need the life insurance anyhow. And so sometimes it just makes sense to add a rider onto something that they already need. I don't know if many of you have given much thought, but life insurance and long-term care are effectively polar opposites of each other, right? Life insurance is protecting you if you die too young. And then long-term care insurance is protecting you, quote, if you live too long. And what ends up happening is growing families, when they're in their 30s and they've got 3 kids, their need for life insurance is as big as it's ever going to be. And they need a lot of life insurance because they haven't been able to experience all of their future income. But now we fast forward and that person becomes 55 and their kids are now grown. That big amount of life insurance is now much smaller. Why is it much smaller? Because we lived. If we lived, what that means is we saved and we invested and we paid down debt. And so now our debt is lower and our account values are higher. Our need for life insurance is trending down. One could argue might even approach zero at retirement. That's the exact time that long-term care insurance is needed so dramatically. Why? Because we're really shifting from protecting my own ability to earn an income through life insurance should I die early. And now we're shifting to protecting the income streams that are established for retirement, which is why long-term care insurance is really retirement portfolio protection. And that's why really life insurance is generally just income protection. And by the way, spoiler alert, if you start talking to clients about protecting their income instead of buying insurance, makes a huge difference. The average client doesn't understand insurance, again, doesn't want insurance, nor do they want to pay for insurance, but they darn well understand what they're earning. And they understand that they made $7,000 this month after tax. And you start asking them, what happens if that $7,000 doesn't come in next month? Then watch how the conversation changes. Okay. What we like to say is it's not what the insurance is, it's what the insurance does. And in both of these scenarios, what it does is it protects income streams, right? And you start talking that way, and then clients get it. And they go, oh, I get that. And I still don't want to buy insurance. And then you laugh. And you go, that's great. Nobody wants to buy insurance. But they're probably going to buy it anyways, because what they want to do is they want to fulfill their goals and their promises to their family. And insurance can be a funding vehicle to make sure that that happens. Okay. And then ultimately we have fixed annuity with long-term care rider. That generally is happening at older ages. This is one of the structures we have that's easiest to qualify for. We're going to, again, walk through examples here for 60-year-old individuals to give you a little bit of a taste. As you know, there's always more to do than time to do it. So as we're going through this, if you're thinking of clients that need to have this kind of conversation, please jot them down. Consider reaching out to me or Andrew afterwards, and we can talk specifically about your client and design something that makes sense for them and help you steward that conversation a little bit better. So if we know who we're going to talk to and we have a sense of what kind of solutions might help us fund this plan, we have to determine how are we going to have the conversation? Where are the entry points, right? You're not just probably going to call somebody up and say, let's talk about long-term care. You got these entry points. I mean, the first of which and the easiest and the one that makes the most sense to me is annual reviews. If you're like most wealth advisors that I've experienced, an annual review is set up for 1 hour. And generally we're talking for 45 minutes about our families and the vacations that we had and just catching up, and maybe 10 or 15 minutes on performance, and then we're done. Well, what if we could carve out some of that time and we could say something like, congratulations, your goals are in order, your investments are on pace. Let's have a conversation around what could keep your goals from coming to fruition. Right? Let's talk about what kind of risks you might have so that we can mitigate or eliminate as many of those as possible. So I think the annual review is a good time to do that. Whether we're in the annual review or not, the best way to ask is personal experience, right? Are you aware of anyone who's had this type of thing happen? And would you mind sharing that with me? What I find is that there's a distinct difference between someone who has personal experience with this and somebody who doesn't. It's like night and day. And certainly I want to understand what my client's experience is prior to really stewarding a conversation, right? And that creates a great entry point by, again, asking, have you ever seen that happen? Now, what I believe is that those that have seen this happen, and if it happens in our family or our families, it's going to be basically the worst of times emotionally. You're going to have an emotional catastrophe if somebody needs care. And by having an appropriate plan and making sure that we can fund that plan, what we've done is we've eliminated a financial catastrophe, right? Because if you have an emotional catastrophe and a financial catastrophe at the exact same time, that's not good. That's like sitting out in the sun with a magnifying glass and just letting your whole yard go up in flames, right? And so that personal experience is very important. Plus, you got to find the motivation. Those that have had personal experience, they're often very motivated to make sure that they have protection because their experience might be that they had to quit working to take care of their mom and that caused them a lot of stress. It might be that they saw their dad in the Alzheimer's unit and went through $10,000 a month for 3 years and took out $360,000 that would have went to their grandkids. You start asking for experiences, you'll hear all sorts of, gnarly experiences. And then we ask our clients, well, how do you feel about this and what's your plan? And would you like to have a plan, right? And now we have permission to steward a plan, okay?
And by the way, we haven't talked about insurance one bit. We're just talking about permission to help them with a plan of care.
That's exactly right, 100%, and that's crucial, okay? Longevity, this one might be interesting, but this makes perfect sense to me, and I hope it will for you. I know many, if not most of you, are running financial planning projections for your clients, and you might be running that longevity plan out to age 90 or 95, right? Because the actuarial age that both people will be dead is about 90 to 95, and you're running plans out there. Well, why is long-term care even needed, right? It's that idea that to the extent that we live a long life, the likelihood that you need help living that long life goes up. And so to the extent that your clients actually live into their 90s, the likelihood that they're going to need some care goes up somewhat dramatically. And so if your clients believe that they could live till 90, then we want to ask them, do you believe that you could potentially need care? And have you had any experience with that? So again, these are entry points so that we can have a good conversation. Okay? Excuse me. At the very end of the day, it's not really about the risk, it's about the consequences. See, what's interesting is that we can't really mitigate risk because the risk is still going to be there, but it's the consequences. What are the emotional, physical, and financial consequences? And do you care about these things, right? When you think about insurance planning, just generally speaking, what we're dealing with is there a risk? How do you feel about the risk? What does it cost to transfer, eliminate, or mute the risk, right? And then at the end of the day, you're really left with two options. You can either accept that risk and the consequences of that, and you can effectively keep your money, or we can transfer some of our money in some way, shape, or form to transfer some of that risk to mute some of the consequences, right? And so we have to determine what is long-term care. A lot of people think that that means you got to be flat on your back in a nursing home. Well, that's not true, right? Many, if not most of our clients are going to receive care at home, right? And we're not flat on our back when that happens. It might start out simply, right? We might need help with a few of the activities of daily living, right? It's generally speaking, it doesn't go from 0 to 100. And so again, we have to steward that kind of conversation. And then
By
when
the
we
way,
put
on the risk
together,
for long-term care,
yep,
there's a lot of carrier materials that specify that, oh, you have 50% chance of needing long-term care. At the end of the day, the risk is either 0 or 100%. You either don't need it, or if you're going to need it, it's going to be 100% that you need it. So sometimes when we quote statistics, people, make excuses in their mind. Oh, it's only 50% is going to happen to him, not me. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen, and it's going to be 100%. So
I love that. I've heard that before. I want to use that more. It's 0 or 100. And the issue is we don't know which it's going to be. So how do you feel about it? And what is the impact going to be to you? And if we can really get to that, yeah, and to your family. And by the way, you want to have this conversation with both the husband and the wife. And that's a generic thing to say. And I'm painting with a little bit of a broad brush. And of course, not all couples are husband and wife, and I recognize that. But what I would say is you want both spouses. And the reason you want both spouses is one spouse, generally the male, tends to blow this stuff off. And one person tends to be a little bit more emotional. And it isn't just mathematics, right? Philip Simonson, a good mentor of both me and Andrew, we learned a lot from him. One of the things that I really believe is that you have to touch the heart before you touch the mind. And that's what Philip taught us. And touching the heart is that emotional piece and recognizing what that might look like. And then touching the mind is looking at it rationally and indicating, here's what the math looks like, right? So we have to touch that heart first, then we have to prove that it's mathematically sound. If we just go in and try to prove it's mathematically sound, it's not going to happen to me. And even if it's mathematically sound, it doesn't make sense for me to put any money there because it's not going to happen to me, right? So we have to be able to address both the heart and the mind. When you talk about a plan of care, at the very end of the day, we want to know, where do you want to receive that care, right? And when you start asking questions, what you find is most clients want that care to be performed at home if possible, right? Who do you want to physically provide for that care? When you really get down and ask it, they don't want their daughter or their spouse to provide that care physically if they can help it, right? But they haven't really thought through this. And they haven't thought through it because they're not masochistic. Who thinks through this stuff? Well, people who are in a planning process do. And that's what we're talking about. This is a planning process, right? And that planning process says we need to ask a couple hard questions so that we can have a plan, so that when Mike Tyson comes at us, we already were anticipating that, right? So who do you want to physically provide that care? And then who do you want to coordinate that care? That's that daughter, that number one daughter. Let's let her coordinate it, but let's let somebody else physically provide it. And then who or what's going to pay for it? If you're going to self-insure, I don't have a problem with that. But we need to identify where and how. So what pile of cash, what asset is going to pay for that? By the way, is that asset going to be the asset that they're trying to achieve an 8% return and being in the market in a 70-30 portfolio? That's probably not a good asset to earmark for this, is it? Why? Because of my comment a few minutes ago. What if somebody needs care right now and they're in a 70-30 portfolio? How far back is their portfolio right now? It's at least 20% back, right? Is that a good time to use that as a funding vehicle? If we're going to self-insure, that funding vehicle, it probably has to be one of our safe money assets. Now, interest rates are really going up dramatically right now. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. But our safe money assets haven't moved up that much, right? What are bank accounts paying today, right? So a lot of times what happens is if you ask them to identify exactly which asset will pay for it, it's going to be a low yielding asset. And by the way, it tees us up the opportunity to say, well, what if we took that low yielding asset and we repositioned it into one of these specially designed structures and get tremendous leverage, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, maybe 6 times leverage, right? So by asking that question, we can often get the false, it's like, no, I'm just going to pay for it myself. They can almost blow you off. You say, okay, what pile is it going to come from? Well, that's a lot more specific.
By the way, Rod, just a quick plug. We have both fillable plan of care worksheet for you to be used in client meeting. And we also have what you're describing right now, an asset identifier worksheet, which literally is asking client, please list out which accounts would be liquidated first in the event that you would need it to pay for care. Yep. And that gets that conversation much more grounded and it becomes much more real.
That's correct. And now we're talking about something that matters to people, right? And it's a subtlety, and I know I repeat myself sometimes, but if you just come at your client and you say, would you like to buy some long-term care insurance? I promise you they're going to tell you no. And if they do tell you yes, they're sick. Okay, I'm sorry to be rude about that. and they buy the smallest number on the page. You gave them 3 quotes and they gave the smallest one, may not be in their best interest. Don't ask them to buy long-term care. Ask them what's important to them about retirement and have they thought about these things. And that's really where the magic is. The last line here, I already started this whole thing with that. Insurance is not the plan, it just pays for the plan. Okay, so let's not lead with insurance, let's lead with the plan. Okay? So at the end of the day, a typical plan when you walk through this, most people will tell you they want a plan that allows you to remain safe in the comfort of your home and a plan that protects the family emotionally and physically, allowing them to supervise the care, not provide the care, and ultimately protect our legacy, right? Because not only do our clients want money generally for themselves in retirement, clearly, but they'd often like to leave something for their heirs and for charities. And by the way, to the extent that that gets sucked out for long-term care costs, that's dollar less for our family. But by having a well thought out plan, we can perhaps put them in a better position than we could have before. So again, funding options, which we mentioned a number of these, Medicare is really just short-term care, right? They'll pay for up to 100 days under certain circumstances, and there's limits. But most of our clients, we're not concerned about 3 months of needing care. It's not going to blow up their financial plan if they need to spend $30,000. But their financial plan probably will be blown up or could be blown up at $100,000 a year for 4 years, right? And so Medicare is really health insurance and really isn't paying for much of any long-term care. It's the short-term care pieces. Medicaid, again, you've got to spend down virtually all of your assets in order to qualify for that. And if you have clients that have 2, 3, 400,000 with you, or 2, 3, or $4 million, that's a very expensive option if they're planning to have Medicaid pay. We have to go through all of their assets first. Now, I might be able to self-pay, and I'm not saying we can't or we shouldn't, but if we're going to self-pay, we need to be able to determine, can we cash flow an additional $4,000 to $10,000 per month? And let's model it in the plan, right? That's that double dipping, right? We said you were fine as long as you took your $8,000 a month, but what if you need another 8,000? So you can stress test a client's portfolio by putting together maybe a what if scenario. If you're using Money Guide Pro or eMoney, you can model these types of things. Other financial planning software can do similar. What I find is that if you have a reasonable client with a high trust relationship with wealth advisors, you're stewarding this kind of conversation. At the very end of the day, long-term care insurance ends up being almost the only viable solution when you really look at the math, right? When you really look at the math, you go, yeah, I really should have some of this coverage. And then we're determining what kind of coverage and what kind of benefits and sort of custom designing solutions, which I believe is really what we do when we do this right. Custom design solutions for our clients. Okay. When we do this right at the very end of the day, which I've alluded to, a client can really only do one of two things. They can either keep their money and keep their risk, or they can transfer some of their money to transfer some of their risk. And this is very crucial. When we do this right, it becomes very clear to most people. When I do joint work with advisors, which by the way, I'm available to do joint work with you should you want to, I generally split on a 50% basis. So if you have a client that you think needs to have this kind of conversation, but you're uncomfortable having it yourself, you could bring me in as a specialist. You could keep 50%. I would keep 50%. If Andrew's your guy, he would support us the whole way through with making sure that we get the right designs that we need for these types of things. But at the end of the day, we're doing a better job for clients. We're driving additional revenue to your practice. We're protecting AUM. We're also keeping competition away. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but I do believe that long-term care planning is the single most important area of planning from a risk management standpoint for our clients. The vast majority of our clients are not going to die prematurely. The vast majority of our clients are not going to have a disability during their working life, although some will. But I do believe that a good majority of our clients are going to have some kind of long-term care event. Andrew said it's 0 or 100, and I believe that. And if the statistic is you're 65, you have roughly a 70% chance of needing some form of care. And I know the math doesn't work, but if you have a husband and a wife right next to each other, well, that's basically a 100% chance for planning purposes that one of you will need care. And by the way, those words for planning purposes, I find to be very powerful when talking to clients, because it's 0 or 100, but we don't know which. But we need to make some kind of assumption for planning purposes. Okay, so for planning purposes, do you want us to assume 0? Right? What if we're wrong? you know, and that brings up another thing. Which mistake do you want to make? You want to plan for zero, but then need $10,000 of a month in care, or do you want to plan for $10,000 a month in care and not need any, right? You start putting things in context for clients, and they start thinking about it differently, right?
Do
Like,
you want to endorse the check on the front or on the back?
beautiful, love that one. Again, you gave me some gems today. I forget about some of these things. If you've
And
got
that, by the
clients,
way,
go ahead.
yeah, refers to if you have an insurance policy to outsource some of the risk to the insurance company. Once you go on claim, the insurance company sends you a check, and you literally just endorse it
Yep.
on the back, and you send it to the care provider. Or if you don't have the insurance to support the plan and you have to self-fund, you now have to buy insurance or buy long-term care at the retail cost, and you're writing a check, and unfortunately you're signing it on the front, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Again, it's the right context. So if you've walked through this kind of conversation, you probably are now in a spot where the client's eyes are wide open. They've already said, okay, this makes sense. They've agreed to be educated, right? When we get them to consider, the next thing we want them to do is to be educated on what their options are. You say, well, listen, I'd like to pull together some options for you so that we can determine what are your best choices. But before I do, without being too direct, I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your health. Are you okay with that? If you skip this part, you end up creating pain for yourself. You might create pain for me or Andrew and running quotes that aren't appropriate. You might create pain for your client because you create a false expectation for them. It takes a little courage to ask clients about their health, but it really needs to be done. And I believe it needs to be done before you put together quotes. And so what I like to do is I like to start with the softest question that I'm aware of, which is, are you as healthy as you look? Now it's soft because you could look a lot of different ways. And I'm just asking, are you as healthy as you look? And I often ask them, is there any concerns you're aware of? A lot of times I get, yeah, I'm healthy. No, there's no concerns. But then I ask the real money question, which is, do you have any prescriptions? And that usually opens the floodgates because then we have prescription. We ask, well, what are those for? And try to drill down. So try to do some pre-screening. Then I will often let them know, at least conceptually, the difference between mortality and morbidity. Why? Because the solutions I'm going to put together for them, some of them are going to be long-term care only, which is a morbidity underwriting. So morbidity is the likelihood that I might become disabled. Well, that's fundamentally different than mortality, which is the likelihood that I might die prematurely. And so if you're being underwritten for a life insurance product, and we have a heart condition that's likely to kill us, we're probably not getting life insurance coverage. But that same individual with the health issue could potentially get long-term care coverage alone because it's more likely to limit that person's death than to allow them to stay alive and then need help. And so if you're dealing with a hybrid product, we need to understand that they're actually underwriting both ways. They'll underwrite for mortality, they'll underwrite for morbidity, and effectively put those rates on top of one another. Okay. All right, beautiful. So once we do that, then we can go to the marketplace and we can pull together some options and we can describe them to them. Now, I want to encourage you not to lead with illustrations. I like to put together one pages. Andrew, you can see this sample client, right? So I like to put together one pagers with the illustrations behind them. I pull them out as we need to, but I like to go in and create 2 or 3 different options. We have a little more than that here today because I want to educate you conceptually on these designs. But what we want to do is it's an executive summary design designed to give us a snapshot so that we can compare and contrast. And comparing and contrasting is very important for a couple of reasons. Number one, clients do not know what they want as much as they know what they don't want. So you walk through some of these, they go, I don't want that one. You go, that's great. And that feeds into number two, is that the client wants to feel that they're in control, right? And so when they indicate that they don't want option one, that's beautiful. So now we've got 2 more and we've refined it. Thirdly, if we know at the executive summary level that they don't want option one, we do not need to show them a 12 or 18 or 30-page illustration. That's just going to confuse them. It's going to take time, right? We don't need to show them that. So actually part of my goal is for them to eliminate options. That's like my main goal actually. have them eliminate options so that we can get down to one option. When we're down to one option, what that means is we're down to one design, and now we can tweak in the benefits that we need. And so here's generally what that would look like. So these are 60-year-old clients, and we're considering just standard underwriting classes for these individuals. Option number one, we can do traditional long-term care. As I had this quoted, we did a 90-day waiting period, $4,000 a month for 4 years with 3% cost of living adjustment. Okay. This is $5,100 a year for these clients. And what they've effectively done is they each have $4,000 a month times 12 months is $48,000 times 4 years is $192,000 each of retirement portfolio protection that is growing at 3% every year, which means that they're 60. When we go out 24 years at 3%, we're going to end up doubling our original benefit. So that means at age 84, which the average age for a claim is between 80 and 85, somewhere right in that area, they would then have $8,000 a month. I think I just said 6, but double 4 is 8. $8,000 a month for 4 years, meaning that each of them are going to have retirement portfolio protection of $368,000 each, which is $8,000 a month times 12 months times 4 years. So you're talking about combined retirement portfolio protection approaching $800,000 in this design for $5,000 per year, right? So you start thinking again about self-insuring. The potential is you might have to come out of pocket $800,000, or we can pay $5,000 a year for this. And now what my clients like about this structure is it's the cheapest structure with the largest long-term care benefits. What they don't like about it is the premiums are not guaranteed to stay level, which really means that the premiums are going to go up, okay? And it's the use it or lose it scenario. If they die without needing long-term care, then the insurance company is going to go ahead and keep their money, okay? From my point of view, if we knew for sure that they were going to need long-term care, everyone would get traditional long-term care. Because if we knew it, that's the best bang for the buck. The problem is if we knew that they wouldn't need long-term care, then this is the worst option because there's no return of premium, there's no cash value, there's no death benefit, there's no residual value. Okay? But what I also find is that one of these structures ends up selling another structure, which is what I was alluding to. And they say, well, I don't like that one. And then it's a refinement, right? Well, what's left? And what are my trade-offs? Okay. Andrew, any comments on that?
No, I mean, the numbers are staggering. When you think about it, it's $5,000 a year, which is, $600 a month in comparison to paying $8,000 per month if you actually need care.
Yep.
So yeah, $5,000 a year is still a lot of money in a vacuum, but when you think about
Yep.
the alternative to have to come up with $8,000, $10,000 per month,
yep.
It's almost like a no-brainer.
Exactly right. If we understand it in context, we want to plan, we want to be safe in our home, we want to give a permission slip, all of those things. If you go over 24 years and you paid that $5,100, that's $123,000 that was traded in for about $800,000 of total long-term care bucket. So that's roughly 7 times leverage. And by the way, that again is tax-free coming out, this $4,000 a month or whatever it grows to. Now, a couple things to consider in that design. There is a shared care rider that could be added, which allows you to dip into your spouse's bucket. It also allows to have a joint waiver of premium, meaning that when the first of you goes on claim, the second individual then has a waiver premium. The traditional long-term care doesn't have a preferred underwriting class. The smoker and non-smoker rates are the same. Well, why? That's kind of weird. Well, that's my comment about morbidity and mortality. So smoking is indeed a mortality risk. It's such a mortality risk that if you're a smoker, generally speaking, you're paying 100% more for the same coverage as the non-smoker. Why? Because the risk managers say that smoking is going to kill you early. Okay? Well, guess what happens if you die early? Don't need long-term care, do you? So that's why when traditional long-term care is being underwritten, smokers get the exact same rate. Okay, so I find that interesting. By the way, I'll tell you, clients find that idea very, very interesting when you talk about morbidity and mortality. Anecdotally, I mean, I've talked to, I don't know, hundreds of people about that, and they're all really intrigued by that. Almost nobody ever thought of that. And they go, oh, And then that it speaks again to the risk. So if we're trying to offload a risk, who do we want to offload that risk to? Professional risk managers, professional money managers. That's who we want to, because they're looking at the law of large numbers and they have thought of all of this, right? And so when you start bringing that in, then it helps again with context. And there's a lot of negativity to insurance companies, as you might be aware. I even have some negativity towards them. But at the very end of the day, without insurance companies, we can't have the capitalistic society that we have. Insurance companies provide a very important service, and we need to understand what that is. And by the way, we need to be able to leverage insurance companies for our own families to the extent that we can. And that's what we can do when we're not just eliminating that insurance conversation because it's too expensive and dirty insurance companies, dirty insurance agents, right? So we have to have a better conversation. It is a reimbursement contract, which means that you effectively have to show receipts, and those premiums are not guaranteed, just as we described. Okay? So option one is to do something on a traditional long-term care basis. Option number two for these individuals is to reposition a lump sum one time. And I did the best I could to match this $4,000 a month for 4 years, right? I was able to match it directly here. So $4,000 a month for 4 years with 3% cost of living adjustment. We can secure a return of premium in year 6. Now, this is a little bit of an old structure. This product has repriced. It's still very much the same, but you can't count on these premiums exactly for today. So again, if you have a 60-year-old, don't go quoting them this. Reach out to me or Andrew. We've seen a lot of changes in long-term care products, and we're continuing to see more. But this product still works very similarly. And what you have here is one time you write $104,000 for Mr. and $116,000 for Mrs. This is that idea. Maybe it's that wealthy individual. We determined that where they were going to fund, we're just repositioning $220,000, right? And what's really cool about that is that to the extent that we do not ever need long-term care, we get all of our contribution back and usually a modest increase on death benefit. So that use it or lose it point goes away. This product also pays out in cash. The $4,000 a month or whatever it raises to pays out in cash, which is better than a reimbursement contract. We don't have to submit receipts. We don't have to have a licensed caregiver. Another nice thing about that is it's a lump sum structure, but they allow to fund over 10 years or less. So to the extent we like this structure, but maybe we want to pay 5 payments instead of repositioning 1 payment, we can certainly do that. Where I see this happening a lot might be the 55-year-old who's 10 years out of retirement. They're making as much money as they ever have. They're empty nesting. The kids are already in college. They're really serious about retirement, and their income's really high right now. We say, you know what, let's get that long-term care need paid up in 10 years so that we don't have to keep that cost with us into retirement. Because wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a long-term care plan completely funded and we didn't have to keep that expense inside of our income plan into retirement? Okay.
Another reason to do a flex pay like a 10 pay is if clients, majority of their assets are in IRAs. You don't want to do a lump sum and then get hit with a tax. So you can spread it out over 10 years. And pre-fund these plans.
Yep, that's a really good point. And then again, it comes to where are we going to fund these things from? And I'm going to give you a little bit of a solution for qualified money, or at least reference one here on my next option. So One America has a plan that's pretty cool. Life insurance and long-term care together on a second to die chassis. So the life insurance only pays when both are dead, but to the extent we need long-term care, we have a long-term care bucket. So the way that I had this thing designed is we solve for $4,000 a month with an unlimited long-term care. Yes, unlimited. You may think that unlimited designs no longer exist. They do inside of this structure. So quite literally, unlimited means they'll pay for 25 years or longer, right? So we get $4,000 a month, unlimited long-term care with a 3% cost of living adjustment. So again, that $4,000 ratcheting up. But to the extent that the clients don't need any long-term care, $133,000 death benefit is paid. So they paid in $222,000. If they never need long-term care at all, they're going to get $133,000 back. If they do need long-term care, they're both going to be able to withdraw $4,000 a month each. They could literally both be on claim at the same time and both draw that amount and have that inflated by 3%. So we go out 24 years again we've got $8,000 a month each, which is really $16,000 a month. If that was 10 years, that's $1.6 million that could be paid out, again, all income tax free with a $222,000 death benefit. Okay. So some things to consider there, again, is the death benefit only available on second death? Well, if we've talked about underwriting and how important that is, that helps tee this up. You say, well, listen, if an insurance company is protecting themselves against a premature death, they can actually give you a better price if they insure both of you on one policy. Right? Because one individual could die tomorrow and the other individual will live 30 years and the death benefit doesn't need to be paid for 30 years. So what that really means is these things are priced to more heavily weight the healthier younger spouse. And this second to die structure can be real good for that. It is a reimbursement contract as well. This product can be funded with qualified money. Now I haven't illustrated it here, but here's how it works. So the money's in the qualified plan, we roll over, say $200,000 out of the qualified plan into a qualified annuity. So the rollover maintains tax deferral. Then that annuity spits out 10 years of income, pushing all of the money out of the qualified annuity. Client gets a 1099 for 10 years for what's pushed out over those 10 years. What's pushed out is sent from the annuity side of the fence, if you will, to the life insurance side to fund a life insurance and long-term care combination plan. What's very cool is from the client's standpoint, what they feel is they feel the rollover from the retirement account and they feel the 1099 that happens for 10 straight years. But everything is bundled and done at the insurance company level. So we don't have to exchange checks or have them do any of this. It's just completely funded. And by the way, it satisfies RMDs that might be required as well. Okay.
And also, One America pays a 10% bonus on this structure on that annuity rollover. So if you're talking about $200,000 rollover, you essentially have a $20,000 free money that the insurance company kicks in to kind of make up for some of the RMD pain that the client will have to incur maybe early.
That's exactly right. So again, it's like if we like the design, then we can hone in on that design, and that's this last bucket. I showed an unlimited long-term care because I wanted to make sure you guys knew that existed. But we could just do a 50 months of long-term care or 66 months, which is a shared bucket. And if we do that per premium dollar, what you'd see is that the monthly benefit would be much higher because it's for a shorter period of time. So there's different ways to sort of massage these, okay? And again, if you have a client that you want to look at real numbers, please reach out to me or Andrew, and we'll take a look at that. It is the lifetime benefit, one of the only structures. Okay? I got two other ones. It's 153. We're going to go right up to the end here. Life long-term care together on a guaranteed universal life chassis. This happens to be Protective Life. Solving for this $4,000 a month. What happens is we have to buy a $200,000 death benefit that allows us to advance $4,000 a month for 50 months. What this is it's a 2% rider, 2% long-term care rider that lets us advance 2% of our death benefit. If our death benefit is $200,000, a 2% advancement is $4,000 a month. If we take that for 50 months, we have a $200,000 for long-term care. So what's cool about this structure is Protective guarantees that you're going to get $200,000 either because you died or because we pulled forward $4,000 a month for 50 months and got our $200,000 that way, or a combination. Maybe we drew on it for 10 months and then passed away. So we pulled out $40,000 while we were alive, and then the remaining $160,000 are paid to the heirs. What my clients like about this is they know exactly what they're getting. They're getting $200,000. That's it. It's exactly what they're getting. They like that it's fully guaranteed, and they like that it's income tax free. They like that the long-term care is paid in cash. What they don't like is that it's more expensive than traditional long-term care, and there's no way to increase for inflation in this kind of design. Okay. I like to create assets, as I mentioned to you. This asset, internal rate of return, means how much money did I put in and how much money did I get out. And so this is based on the death benefit. So if Mr. went out 20 years and passed away, and he was paying $5,500 a year for 20 years, his return to turn into $200,000 of death benefit was 5.37%. Now that 5.37% was guaranteed and non-correlated to the market and income tax free to the heirs. People think insurance is always so expensive. Well, that's a 5.37% return. That gentleman is age 80. What if he's 85? Well, now we have to pay 5 more years of premium. Well, now his return is only 2.74. But that's a 2.74 guaranteed non-correlated income tax-free return. When you're talking about an asset class, that might be a reasonably performing asset class when we can take investment risk off of the table. And then 30 years, well, look, now we're getting all the money back plus 1%. But again, people think that insurance companies just take all of our money. Well, if he did this structure, lives 30 years, they're giving him back all of his money plus a 1% return. Now, if that happened and we knew that was going to happen, would I recommend that he put the money here over 30 years? No, of course not. But again, it's 0 or 100, and which one is it going to be? Okay. I did quote that at standard rates. We can get better rates with preferred and preferred best. We do definitely need a paramedical exam because they're supporting so much death benefit. They're going to want to see blood and urine. And we guaranteed that structure to age 120, but we can do similar structures by lowering our guarantee maybe to age 90 or so. And in so doing, we might be able to reduce maybe 20% in premium. We take a little more risk because it depends how the product performs. But I just want you guys to realize that we could take a lesser guarantee for lesser premium in this kind of design as well. Okay. And then the last structure is the structure easiest to qualify for and can accommodate the older ages better than these other structures. And so Global Atlantic, what they allow for is a 2 or 3 times leverage on long-term care available over 72 months for an individual. What that means is that if we put $100,000 into this annuity, depending on if they get approved at 2 or 3 times, if they're approved at 3 times, the 100 turns into $300,000, and we can access $300,000 at approximately $4,100 a month for 72 months. If we do it on a joint basis, we can do that over 90 months. And the real magic here is twofold. What's perfect for this kind of structure is a non-qualified annuity that has a low basis that isn't needed for income. So maybe you've got a $100,000 value, you've got a $40,000 basis, it's not in your income plan. Well, we can turn that $100,000 into $300,000, and to the extent that it comes out for long-term care purposes, comes out completely tax-free because of the Pension Protection Act for long-term care, despite the fact that we have a $40,000 basis in my example. So it's great for repositioning that.
Yeah, by doing a 1035 exchange from an old annuity that is no longer needed to support income, and now we can repurpose that into asset protection by doing a tax-free 1035 exchange.
That's exactly right. And that's beautiful. And then the other thing is that it's such a simplified issue. The way this works is there's like 5 questions that you have to answer. If you answer no to all 5 questions, you're automatically approved. Then they give you a list of about 12 more questions. If you say yes to any of the 12 questions, then you're only approved at 2 times. If you can say no to each of those 12 questions, you can get 3 times. And what I want you to know is there's people that we knew were going to get declined in some of these other structures, like literally going to get declined, can't get it. And they have been able to qualify for 3 times leverage on this product. And so it is by far the easiest product to qualify for. So again, if you have someone that you think cannot qualify for, and they do have a lump sum, whether it's in an existing annuity or not, reach out to me or Andrew, and we'd love to talk you through that piece. Okay. So Andrew, we just got a couple more minutes left. The reality is that we want to thank you guys for being here. We won't be having a coach's corner in July, but we'll pick back up in August. So that's August 21st. We'll hope to be able to see you there. As we've alluded to, we have a number of tools, including a fillable plan of care worksheet. We have something like 6 tips on having a better long-term care conversation in a white paper. We do have a guide on how Medicare works and what is and is not covered. We also have a nice brochure that's client approved for the myths of long-term care. One other thing is we do have this long-term care engaged planning conversation sheet, which is sort of what I just walked you through. What's the risk and the consequences? How do we create a plan? What pays for the plan, et cetera. And if you have not seen our Insurance Advisor Toolbox, please reach out to us and request this. This has all of our best stuff, including past Coaches Corners. We have different fact finders, different scripts, different white papers, etc. So with that, I'm going to throw it back over to Andrew for you to wrap us up with the final word.
Thank you, Rod, and thank you for your invaluable input here in this conversation. Couple of things. First of all, these conversations will not happen unless you are intentional about it. And the best way to be intentional about it is, again, maybe even utilize Rod on the first case. See how he has this conversation with your clients. I've seen him in action firsthand, and it's an amazing experience for both the client and the advisor. And the advisor can learn from Rod's experience and then start kind of mimicking and mirroring the same process. Also, get in the habit of putting long-term care planning or plan of care conversation on the client's annual review agenda. If it's on the agenda, that means we have to talk about it. If it's not the agenda, I guarantee you'll talk about 100 other things and you'll never talk about plan of care, long-term care planning. So please put it on the agenda. One great way to kind of start having the client prep for it mentally is maybe include the plan of care worksheet. Let them know that you'll be discussing some of the steps to make sure that their portfolio is protected. And third, understand that you don't have to do this yourself. You have a great team at US Advisors Insurance Agency to help you with both the conversation, resources to get the message out to your clients, consumer videos, and most importantly, help you with the design, conversation, and presentation to make sure that those solutions are being implemented. So please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rod, George on our team, or myself.
It's beautiful. Well, I appreciate you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to serving you.
Thanks for the business.
Take care.